I've been a fan of Spider-Man for virtually all my life. You might even call me a Spider fan, but don't. I vividly remember when the first Sam Raimi directed Spider-Man movie was coming out. I was 4 years old, I turned 5 a day before the movie came out, and I remember reading in Nickelodeon magazine an interview with Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst. And in this article there was a picture of the Green Goblin who was to be the villain of this movie, a character I'd known well at this point from brief glimpses of him from the Spider-Man comics, but especially from his depiction in the 1994 Spider-Man animated series. I remember looking at this picture. I think it was an image from the scene where he attacks Aunt May, and because of the fire in the scene and it being night, there was this harsh orange or yellow light and very heavy shadows. And I remember thinking to myself, there's no in green. I kind of remember my dad being like, well, this movie's gonna be real life, so they probably want him to look a little less silly and a little more scary. And I just remember thinking, the Green Goblin from the cartoons is way scarier than this guy. Anyway, all of this to say that despite being a huge fan of Spider-Man, I have had complicated feelings about every single live-action Spider-Man movie to varying degrees and at varying points in my life. And the newest film, Spider-Man No Way Home, a film people are calling the greatest superhero movie of all time, is no different. Now don't get me wrong, I enjoyed this movie. I saw it twice in theaters and have rewatched many of my favorite scenes and terribly shot cell phone footage on YouTube. I had a lot of fun with this movie, and I think it averages out to be pretty good. But I do have my problems with it, problems which I think are more emblematic about my feelings about the Marvel Cinematic Universe at large. Problems I won't get into today, but I do want to look at one of them in particular through the lens of a specific character, Jamie Foxx's Electro. So the name of this video is Did No Way Home Fix Electro? And I'm just going to be straight up with you now, I don't think so. But this video isn't so much as to definitively answer that question so much as to explain my reasoning behind my feelings behind it. Movies, like all forms of art, are subjective experiences for their viewer. So you might have a differing viewpoint from mine, and if you do, I'd love to hear it. But hear me out first. First, let me take you off to a far-off, different, forgotten time. 2014. The Amazing Spider-Man 2, Sony's sequel to the newly rebooted Spider-Man series, was on its way, and its main villain was to be Jamie Foxx's Max Dillon, Electro. I recall a lot of people at the time, including myself, having a very similar reaction to Electro's design that I had had to the Goblin back in 2002. It kind of seemed to be a bigger deal, but maybe that's just because the internet was becoming more of a thing, and so there were louder voices on the subject. But to me, it seemed like people were even more averse to Electro's design than I had been to the Goblins back in 2002. Now, I didn't love the look, but personally, I was fine with it. For one, Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin suit in action actually looked pretty great in my opinion, and furthermore, it's not like this was the only time Electro would be depicted with this particular look, or one similar to it. I personally preferred the green and yellow suit and felt that there were ways you could make that work in live action, but I understood that that wasn't what was going to determine how good of a character Electro would be. The movie would do that. You remember when I said I've had a complicated relationship with all the Spider-Man movies? Well, I did not like Electro or any of the movie at all the first time I saw it. But I have warmed up to it since. I still think it is very messy and far from reaching its full potential, but one of the things I actually really like about it is Electro. Electro, like many early Spider-Man villains, isn't all that complicated. Depth has been added to him in his various incarnations over time, but let's be real. Max Dillon is an electrician who gets struck by lightning while working on a power line and becomes imbued with the power of electricity, and he uses that to commit petty thefts. All well and good for a Silver Age comic book character that is far from the central focus of his books, but if you're gonna make a movie about this character, you're gonna have to beef him up a bit. And I think Marc Webb and Sony came up with an interesting take for the character in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Maxwell Dillon, in the movie, is a lonely man who works as an electrician at Oscorp and he feels invisible. He feels like a nobody. One day, Spider-Man saves him and treats him in a way he has never experienced from his work colleagues or family. He treats him like a human being for the briefest of moments, and it makes Max feel like someone. After some time and a mishap involving electric eels, Max becomes disfigured and empowered with electricity. He's confused and scared, and his friend Spider-Man comes to help him. But due to, for the sake of simplicity, let's say, a miscommunication, he feels betrayed by Spider-Man, the one person in his life up to this point who has treated him like a normal person. And so he cuts himself off from any connections to his humanity and decides to use his newfound abilities to give himself a feeling of wholeness to replace the emptiness in his life he has rediscovered. And this is further complicated when Harry Osborn manipulates those feelings, the longing of connection, to make his beef with Spidey more personal. That sounds like a pretty good movie to me. Granted, there's a lot of stuff in between that works and a lot of stuff that doesn't. The movie feels very all over the place and messy, but I feel like the story of Max Dillon is told very well, and that the movie has a really good take on the character. And I think Jamie Foxx's performance is very over the top, and yet also is very grounded. He gives this guy a lot of personality and sadness, and it's genuinely sad to see the optimism he has at the start of the movie be diminished over time. But yes, his performance can be a little bit silly, and a lot of other choices the movie makes verges into a little bit of camp, and I think that turned a lot of people off. Especially after the first Amazing Spider-Man's apparent mission statement to try and be like the Chris Nolan Batman trilogy for Spider-Man. And for a lot of people, I think if some of the movie doesn't work, the whole movie doesn't work, and that's totally fair, I get it. I think there's a lot more that could have been done with Electro within the framework of the movie's interpretation of the character that could have and probably should have been done to flesh him out even more and to invest the audience in him more, but I think the groundwork for a really great villain was laid. I think that this actor in this character, if it had been given to a more deft hand, or at least one with lesser studio interference, I think it could have been looked on in a much more positive light. But the movie ends with the character being seemingly killed, and even if he was going to return in a later movie and potentially be fleshed out more, shortly after the release of this movie, the Amazing Spider-Man series was cancelled, and Sony Pictures and Marvel Studios made their unprecedented deal in which they would share the film character of Spider-Man, and he would be rebooted into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And that was the end of Jamie Foxx's Electro. Until, that is, that rumblings and rumors of the Marvel Studios produced third Spider-Man movie started reaching entertainment news, and it was confirmed that Jamie Foxx, along with Alfred Molina's Dr. Octopus from Raimi's Spider-Man 2, would be returning as Electro in the then untitled Spider-Man 3. A lot of people at this time, including myself, who had yet to go back into Amazing Spider-Man 2 and find a lot of redeeming aspects, were excited to see where Kevin Feige and Jon Watts would take Electro and improve on his character a bit, flesh him out a little bit more, and also bring in aspects of the character that Webb didn't use, primarily the look, and integrate it all into one full character. In a lot of interviews with Jamie Foxx, it seems like that aspect was what most enticed him into coming back.
He's got a new look, though.
Yeah, when they did this one, you know, new helm and things like that, they were like, let's do a different Electro. And I think what's great about it is the fact it simplified it. Like it's dope. It's some fly stuff that you could wear to the club almost. It's dope. And I didn't have to be blue and things like that as far as my character was concerned. So you're going to be a little more hip and whatever like that.
Electro's back and different, sleek, simplified. They got a chance to give it swag. We changed it up a little bit, simplified the look. It's different, it's fresh, it's new, and it's a different look. He's simplified, potent, kind of got a flyness to him, and so everybody online has been, you know, really like reacting well to it. So just can't wait for people to check it out. You could tell by the online interaction.
Oh yeah, fans have been going crazy.
Yeah, they were pleased with that, and I was pleased with it as well.
We promised him he wouldn't be blue.
With the League of the returning villains from prior movies becoming news, it seemed like the marketing sort of shifted to lean on this aspect of the movie. And it seemed that the narrative from fans and commenters was that Willem Dafoe and Alfred Molina were returning to these beloved roles and getting a chance to explore these wonderful characters further. And Jamie Foxx was returning almost in an act of redemption. For him. For the character of Electro. And this narrative was seemingly supported by the marketing of the movie. It felt as if Jamie Foxx's Electro was going to come in and, while being the same character from the Marc Webb movie, would be a new take on the character that attempted to fix the problems that people had with him in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, including the look. In fact, it sort of felt like the look was the main aspect advertised as being fixed.
How you like the new?
And honestly, I do like the new look, and I definitely prefer it to the blue look, but I mean, I still don't have a problem with the blue look. But either way, I was excited to see the new look and see how it would be justified and explored within the movie and what that would mean for the character. It turned out barely and very little, respectively. Rather than fix, it seemed like Feige and company were more interested in changing entirely the character of Electro.
I won't say you're wrong, but I also won't say you're right.
And given the little amount of screen time he has in this movie, there is very little justification or exploration for the change, and aside from being played by the same actor, there is little connective tissue between his two appearances. This kind of segues into one of my problems with the MCU. These movies are, for better and worse, giving you, the fans, what you want. And this large-scale interconnectivity between 20-something movies and TV shows is also at play in a micro way within the movies themselves. These movies are playing a game. I've made some short films and sketches, primarily comedic, with my friends before. And in a lot of cases, we'd have a very loose concept, and then we'd have these ideas for big scenes or set pieces that we'd find really funny or think people would want to see. And we'd try to lay these out, and then we would essentially be playing connect the dots to find the context points to drive into the next thing we want to do. I feel like this sort of thing works in a low-stakes comedy short with no real story that few people will see anyway, because the little in-between scenes, while we'd usually try to make them funny or memorable too, didn't really matter as much as the big, silly set pieces and parodies that we wanted to make and that we thought people would want to see. Having done this myself and then looked at what some of the more recent Marvel Studios productions have been doing, I can't help but feel like they're kind of doing the same thing. And having watched those movies and enjoyed them, with crowds of people who have also enjoyed them, I recognize the formula and acknowledge it works. Avengers Infinity War and Endgame are made up of these huge moments that are set up in the moment just right and executed in the most crowd-pleasing ways. Many moments that are in-jokes or references to small little moments in prior movies. These movies are, in a big way, connecting the dots between solo movies and team-up movies, finding threads that bind this cinematic universe into a cohesive whole. That was what was exciting about it in 2012 when the Avengers teamed up for the first time, and it's what Marvel has been doing for over a decade now. And it's what people are really connecting to in the most recent Avengers movies, and of course, Spider-Man No Way Home. There's no denying the love that people have for these movies, and there's no denying that the formula works and is continuing to work. And I'm not going to lead into saying that these movies are bad or that superhero movies are a bubble waiting to burst. The superhero fatigue syndrome many have discussed in recent years has not set in the way people thought it would. And it hasn't set in for me either. I mean, I keep seeing these things and watching them and having a good time. I think my problem with it is that it's a repeating formula, and the more you start to see it, the less of an effect it has on you. And the less of an effect it has on you, the more you wish that there was something more underneath. It makes you crave a greater feeling of inevitability and thematic cohesion. And it's not impossible. I feel like the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, particularly the second one, are full of both the connect-the-dots crowd-pleasing moments and self-contained thematic storytelling with an emphasis on catharsis and unifying themes. I know this has been a bit of a sidetrack from the topic at hand, but I think it explains in a larger way my problem with the way Electro was handled in this movie and in the MCU in general. You're excited to see this character again and to see this updated take on him, and in a very surface level way, the movie connects the dots from The Amazing Spider-Man 2 to drop him into No Way Home. But in doing that, and to give you the exciting things fans would speculate about, integration of a Stark arc reactor into a setup and stuff like that, the movie picks this fan-pleasing concept over something that I think is more important and something I feel like the movie ultimately lacked. Remember that breakdown of Electro's character in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 I gave you earlier in the video? Yeah, where was any of that in this movie? I mean, I guess it's sort of part of it in that one scene with Max and Peter at the end, but for the rest of the movie, Electro's characterization is completely dropped. There's still a bit of the longing for power from the last movie, but here it's taken a lot more literally, and the lack of Max's previous characterization removes a lot of the purpose behind his motivation. For me, at least. I think the thing that makes that really not work for me is that this character in this movie could be anybody. And it essentially is. You might as well drop in Jamie Foxx's character from Baby Driver into this movie and give him Electro's powers and the same thing would happen. Electro here is used as a tool. And I mean, that's effectively what any character in a movie is, a tool. But here, he is used as a tool to introduce the concept of the multiverse into the MCU and to deliver a recognizable face from another movie franchise. His character here is not used as a tool to serve as Tom Holland's Peter, or Andrew Garfield's Peter, or even his own character in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And you know, it's not necessarily a bad thing that a character in a movie does not serve that greater purpose to that movie, but if that's all it was going to be, then why, I ask, was he effectively the secondary villain of the movie? I think a big reason is just that he's been introduced before, and so you don't have to go through the heavy lifting of re-originizing him for the audience. They already know who he is.
And who are you?
Don't you know? I'm Electro.
And again, I'm even fine with that, but the total lack of Jamie Foxx's honestly inspired performance in Amazing Spider-Man 2 makes his use in this movie baffling to me. I have my own unsubstantiated theories that Jamie Foxx was willing to come back, but only if he could be cooler. I mean, he's essentially just playing himself in this movie. Or that Kevin Feige felt that Electro in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was too unrelatable, as he said in a leaked Sony email from 2014, and wanted to make him seem less crazy. I feel like Electro's use in this movie is indicative of the use of every returning character in No Way Home. He's just the biggest offender of the issue. There's a general lack of characterization with all of these people. The thing that keeps them consistent and gives them purpose is mostly driven by their actors, all incredibly talented people. The choice to have Jamie Foxx give an entirely different performance inconsistent with who the character was established to be just makes it the most apparent with him. The same story could have been told with just the Green Goblin and the former Spider-Man. The same themes, the same story beats, the same general outline, and the movie would have still been great, maybe even better. Maybe it could have even been the Green Goblin and Electro, and you get more time with those characters, and maybe a more consistent characterization could have been established that properly progressed Electro from where he was at the end of his last appearance into the more Jamie Foxx-ish Electro here in a much more natural and readable way. I mean, let's be real. What do Sandman and the Lizard even add to this movie? And I love Alfred Molina's Doc Ock, and I was excited to finally see him with his arms and his de-AI'd Octavius brain in tandem, being heroic and an ally to Spider-Man. But this movie didn't need that. It didn't add anything, except for a nice few callbacks to the actual greatest superhero movie of all time. I think, at the end of the day, I'm just frustrated that there was a genuine take on a character that was fully fleshed out, and maybe it didn't work. It worked for me, but it didn't work for a lot of people. That's fine. It just bothers me that that take was completely abandoned in favor of an entirely utilitarian version of the character who seemed to be doing more work in marketing the movie than being a part of it. Anyway, that's how I feel about Electro's use in No Way Home. I think that rather than fixing Electro, it mostly dismissed him, and probably cemented his place in the public consciousness as a lackluster, disposable cinematic villain for all time. But that's just my take on it. I'd be happy to hear from those that disagree and maybe even explain to me why you feel like I'm wrong. I would love to change my mind or have a different perspective on this. I liked this movie a lot and would be perfectly happy to like it even more. But thanks for watching and listening to me ramble about something that no one cares about. That's what I do.